This video is dedicated to my late friend and amazing autistic advocate, Andy Burns. He looked forward to seeing this project and greatly encouraged my efforts. While I am deeply disappointed that I was unable to finish it in time for him to see here on Earth, I hope he can see it from heaven. The world of autism tends to be full of very different people with very different ideas about what is best for autistic people. Many times it seems like autistic people line up on one side and parents and family of autistic people line up on the other, with this us versus them mentality that online can often become battles of who's doing what right. One of the biggest struggles appears to be around who gets to speak for non-speaking autistic people, those who have not yet been able to communicate complex needs and thoughts via speech. Parents often feel that they are their child's voice, and autistic advocates tend to feel that because they're autistic, they have a better understanding of the autistic experience and therefore know that child better and can help them in a better way than parents can. It feels like a tug of war between parents and autistic advocates, each wanting the best for autistic people, but rarely ever being able to listen and value each other's perspectives and what they have to say. In order to begin bridging this gap, I have interviewed autistic people who are speaking, autistic people who are non-speaking, parents of those who are non-speakers, as well as autistic parents of autistic non-speakers, because I believe that all of these perspectives are valuable in this conversation. I'd like to acknowledge that even in this lineup of very different people with different perspectives, your particular perspective might not be represented. Perhaps as a testament to the volatility of this type of conversation, a lot of people turned me down or expressed anxiety over what people's reactions would be to their opinion or their thoughts. I've done my best to give space for different viewpoints and positions, and hopefully you can somewhat identify with some of the perspectives that are represented here. Whatever your perspective, I hope that this video can help us all to try to listen to each other more and understand each other's different perspectives and reasons for maybe how we think or what we say, and be able to begin to bridge that gap to begin to work together collaboratively to help non-speaking autistic people and the autistic community in general, rather than fighting and alienating each other. This video has been nearly 3 years in the making, so the interviews that you will see could have been conducted anywhere from 2020 to 2022. The full interviews with these guests will be released over the following weeks, and I highly encourage you to watch those full interviews because they have a lot of things that they wanted to share and perspectives that didn't quite make it into this video, so be sure to be on the lookout for those. With all of that said, let's get started. An estimated 40% of autistic people are considered to be non-speaking, which includes non-reliably speaking or limited speaking. Despite being a large portion of the autistic population, they tend to receive less attention in studies than their speaking counterparts. Many autistic self-advocates, such as myself, have gained traction and a platform in which to share their experiences and perspectives, and help influence how autism is perceived and understood, as well as guide parents and professionals. According to one paper, the amplification of autistic viewpoints, coupled with traction of neurodiversity as a concept and movement, has led to the emergence of new ethical, theoretical, and ideological debates, which have had genuine impact in some areas of autism research, predominantly that focused on adults. They note that areas that have been impacted include looking into the concept of double empathy, greater emphasis on improving mental health and quality of life for autistic people, increase in research into effective person-centered mental health interventions, and research into the community preferences of language used in describing autism and autistic people. The neurodiversity movement and speaking autistic people have made great impact and change, but they often leave non-speakers out of the conversation just as much as the scientific community. In fact, in efforts to dispel stereotypes about autism, speaking autistic people's abilities tend to be overemphasized, and there's this rejection of any kind of representation of those who have higher support needs or are non-speaking. And a lot of times this is coming just as a pushback because they feel as though this is only perpetuating this idea or this stigma that autism only looks one particular way. Consider everyone's feelings, it seems to be, about Rain Man. But at the same time, many of these speaking autistic advocates claim to be in some form or way representative of or speaking for non-speaking autistic people due to their shared neurotype. This is where the conversation around non-speakers tends to appear, and who has the right to speak for non-speaking autistic people.
There is a divide, which has been created, which should have never happened. But basically, it's kind of like parents against autistic advocates, which I wish it wasn't the case, but it is what it is.
You'll have like the families of people, especially people that are like need more support or nonverbal. And then you'll have like the advocates, the autism advocates, a lot of who are verbal and don't need as much support. And it's like, well, they don't know exactly what they're going through.
In the never-ending battle of autistic advocates online against autism moms and parents in general, non-speakers are often used as a sort of pawn in the overall argument. Many times, parents will compare speaking autistic people to their non-speaking child, claiming that they, the parent, are their child's voice, that the autistic advocates have no idea what it's like to parent a non-speaker, and their autism is too different to be comparable.
The people who can advocate on social media, they can't possibly understand what being on the severe side of the spectrum is like. And we can't just lump autism in that one category, That's why we have those severity levels. I hope people remember that before attacking parents and other autistic on social media.
In an article on Autism Warrior Parents, Rosa notes that those who fall under this title are parents who consider their children so impaired that the opinions and personal experiences of autistic advocates are irrelevant to them. Any autistic adult who can put words on a screen or speak should be ignored and refuse to accept their autistic child's actual reality and needs, and instead put their energies into absolute change or control of that child. Regardless of whether a parent feels autistic feedback online is useful to them as a parent of a non-speaker, parents are typically the closest to their child, which gives them an understanding that random people on the internet don't have.
I like to say I'm just a mom, and I have I'm not an expert, but I'm an expert on my children. I can tell, especially with my Tristan, my 17-year-old who is nonverbal, I can tell by the way he's acting like, okay, guys, we need to pull back a little bit. He's getting agitated. We're running out of time. We need to change something before he has a meltdown. He can't handle this environment for much longer. And same with my older son, little Evan, my 18-year-old. It's just nonverbal cues that we pick up on.
I feel I understand her about 50%. Meaning, if we just go off of traditional, if she's in pain, if she's not feeling well or whatever, but I feel like there's so much more to her that I don't understand. And then sometimes things pop out and I'm like, wow, you know what I mean? That we didn't know she knew or things like that, which tells me there's a whole lot we don't know she knows.
Now, autistic parents of non-speaking autistic children do appear to, at least in some ways, benefit from their shared neurotype in understanding their child.
I feel that a parent understands their child the best because I share some of my genes with him, and a lot of times, because we're of the same gender, I can see a lot of myself in him. I ask myself, how would I feel in this situation? And a lot of times I can kind of project it onto him, and a lot of times it works out. And being autistic also helps me be more acceptable of his behaviors.
I understand him better on certain aspects because of my own autism. So, for instance, with like crowds and loud noise, stuff like that, I can relate to his struggles because I struggle with that too. And, for instance, there's some quiet noise that are not going to bother other people, that are going to bother me and him, and other people are going to be like, really? That was like not loud, but like I get it. So on that level, it helps me understand him. But on the communication part of it, it does not help me because he's completely nonverbal. He communicates his needs very basic needs with an app on his iPad. So like he can say, I want water, I want cookie. Let's be real, most of the time it's going to be some unhealthy food. But beyond that, I don't really understand him. Like one time he was really sick and not even the doctors knew what was happening because he couldn't even tell us like if he was in pain or anything. So my own autism helps me just a little bit to understand Charlie's experience with autism better.
Within the description of the autism warrior parent is this quiet assumption that it is autistic people who understand the autistic child's needs and reality. Even outside of autistic advocates, parents are often sent the message, whether that's by professionals or even family members, that other people understand their own child better than they do.
I've noticed it comes from two groups of people. One group is like really old people who are like older than my parents, like my grandmother's age group, late 70s, 80s, like between, let's say 78 and 90, who's like, if you just discipline them more. And I'm like, awesome. Haven't thought of that one. And the other group is usually young professionals who have no kids themselves, who like maybe have just graduated college, who, don't get me wrong, they do have knowledge, but they don't have knowledge in being a parent. They don't have knowledge in like what it's like to be in this 24/7. I get you. I hear you. I will think about what you said, but you may have a degree in child development or whatever it is, and you may be an expert in that field, but I'm an expert on my child.
Autistic advocates often use the dreadful catalog of parents who have been less than stellar toward their autistic children to say that most, if not all, parents, especially those who don't agree with the main narratives around neurodiversity, are somehow exploitative, abusive, or just straight up clueless about what their child really needs or how they really feel. They're often indirectly claiming to know more about that autistic person than their own parents and family. For example, Rosa expresses concerns about the mindset described as autism warrior parent, or AWP, saying the following: once parents have internalized AWP messages that their autistic kids are projects rather than people, it's not much of a stretch when they empathize with and refuse to judge parents who murder their autistic children. While it is true that the burden mindset can absolutely result in terrible things, that doesn't necessarily mean everyone people online try to ostracize as one of these parents, often not even meeting the description Rosa makes, have this mindset or are this way.
Do I experience people telling me that they know more about my child than I do? Yeah, well, I'm very active on social media, and people like to give their opinion on everything. Just like I was saying, the autistic adults are going to tell me that I'm abusing my son with ABA therapy, that they know better because they're autistic. But, for some reason, the fact that I'm autistic too doesn't matter in that conversation. They will tell me that I have self-internalized ableism. There's always an explanation from them to justify why they know better than me. And it can be very frustrating because I'm a mother. I have autism too. And I would never do anything to my child that I don't think is beneficial for him, or I would never do anything harmful. I don't think a stranger on the internet who's never seen my child knows better than me. Hell, I'm not saying I know everything that's good for my child. I'm still trying to figure it out because his lack of communication makes this very hard. But I definitely know better than strangers on the internet, at least for my own child. Whatever they want to do with their own child or themselves, it's up to them. But I know my child better than strangers on the internet.
Do speaking autistic people feel that they understand autistic non-speakers purely based on the merit of their shared neurotype?
I'll tell you, I meet some people with autism like that need a lot more support than I do or are nonverbal, but like when I'm around them and then I'm around the people that are usually around them helping them, I can kind of tell when their reactions are not the right thing to do. I see a lot, for example, like somebody autism is like, they seem to be upset or they're like, starting to get kind of this. And instead of like giving that person space, they'll be like, well, what's wrong? You want this? Do you want this? Do you need this? And in my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, that would make me crazy. And inevitably the person like blows up. And I do feel like I have an understanding, although no one can know another person's mind and feelings. But I do feel a lot of times like I have understanding of people because I have autism than people who don't and are trying to help. But sometimes I feel like they're going about it the definite wrong way because I can feel it inside. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting anxious and I'm not even the one having the hard time. And I'm feeling it for that person. So I guess a little bit, yes. But then also you get to know a person and sometimes they do know their friend or family member. They know how they're going to react and they know what's coming next too. So I think it's a mixture of both.
Now, as an autistic person myself, I agree a lot with Jen here. As she has experienced and others have mentioned, a lot of times autistic people can relate to each other in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to sensory things or even ways of thinking. And especially if you're there experiencing the same thing they are, it's a lot easier for an autistic person to look at that situation and be able to point out what's going wrong. This is based off of one's own feelings and responses, especially if they are in the situation as well. So I feel that speaking autistic advocates absolutely can bring a lot to the table. They can help people understand sensory issues and ways of thinking and things that might be difficult or ideas that don't quite fit just because we think differently or see the world differently. But also, people who are close to that autistic non-speaker might understand how they react to certain things a lot better than an autistic person who doesn't know them very well. They might know what's coming next. They might know what helps them calm down the best. They might know a lot more than me just from being in the same room. Not every speaking autistic person necessarily feels that they can understand a non-speaking autistic person just based on sharing the diagnosis.
There's all these aspects of a person, all these aspects where like I could probably relate to some of the aspects, but I would only be able to, I think, relate and understand a person that doesn't speak if I live with them. If I live with them, if I observe them, if I see them.
What do autistic non-speakers feel about being represented by speaking autistic people? The following is from autistic non-speaker Ido Kedar, sharing via pre-typed text-to-speech on his iPad in response to the question, do you feel understood and represented by speaking or lower support needs autistic advocates who tend to dominate autistic spaces, and why or why not?
That's a really important issue. The reason they dominate is because they talk. That's it in a nutshell. Not many non-speaking autistic people have been given a means to communicate by typing. To do so is a long journey requiring highly trained instructors. Unfortunately, the majority of non-speaking autistics have no means to say what they think because they have not received this kind of instruction. The result is that too many are totally trapped internally and so they cannot speak for themselves. But that does not mean they don't have valuable perspectives. Often those with a diagnosis of autism who do speak verbally are put in the position of being spokespeople for all autistics by default, and because all have received the same diagnosis of autism. I have written several times that I consider this problematic. Autism spectrum disorder is pretty broad. Many people with little in common in terms of their challenges are lumped together under this broad umbrella term. I believe that how we are dealing with is less a spectrum and more like different neurological conditions that have some similar characteristics and many different ones that have been given the same name. Because they are lumped together as a spectrum, people assume that non-speaking autism is just a really severe version of Asperger's, or what used to be called Asperger's, or so-called mild or high-functioning autism. I don't see it that way, and it generates great confusion. It is my belief that non or limited speaking autistics who have broken through the communication barrier must be our own spokespeople, sharing our insights and recommendations based on our experiences and unique perspectives.
Autistic non-speaker Ben Bro interviewed with me over Zoom and used a letterboard and his communication and regulation partner, Sarah, to communicate with me. So for Ben's responses, Sarah will be the one speaking aloud what he spelled. Ben's response to the same question was this.
He said, not really. Each autistic experience is different, and the obstacles non-speaking people face can be very different. For example, speakers can vocally object when they are misrepresented. Non-speakers can't without the right support.
So while speaking autistic people may have some insight, that doesn't necessarily mean that non-speakers will feel well represented by them. Noah Seebeck, a non-speaking autistic writer, notes the following. I have a message of hope and healing to share after taking an even deeper dive into the trauma not being presumed competent and not having a voice has caused. I'm sure this is the same for neurotypicals, but a big but is I couldn't call foul on any wrongdoing. I couldn't ask for help. I was thought to be impervious to all the things that hurt humans. I couldn't deal with anything or anyone outside of my own head. And there were many anythings and anyones. Lost opportunities, discrimination, injustice, bullying, shame, ugly words, no hope for a future. I could go on and on. Again, the takeaway here is although many people have experienced these things, non-speakers without communication can alert no one. His words highlight the very difficult reality that the inability to communicate creates. The presumption of incompetence has been a mainstream idea for a long time, one that many parents and autistic advocates have pushed back against.
I was not sure my parents would crack the code of silence and figure out I was intellectually intact when I was a boy. But it did happen when I was 7, when my mom finally realized what she saw with her own eyes instead of listening to the platitudes of the so-called experts.
It was Ito's mom, trusting that she knew her child more than the experts around her, that led to Ito being able to access communication that worked for him. While it absolutely would be best for communication to be made accessible for every single person, every autistic non-speaker, this isn't always possible. This might take a very long time to achieve. And during that time where someone cannot communicate on their own behalf reliably or in a method that works for them, who is going to communicate their needs? Who is going to be able to speak on their behalf? This is where the controversial claim of parents being their autistic child's voice tends to come in.
Unfortunately, I do feel like I am their voice. I don't want to be their voice. I want them to learn how to communicate in some way, shape, or form so that they can be their own voice. They're 17 and 18 years old. You know, when they were 5 or 6, it's pretty normal for the parent to kind of be that, have that role. But they're 17 and 18 now. They're young men. I don't want to be their voice. I don't want to be that person. So we're doing everything we can to, I feel like in a sort of way I'm trying to push them out the front door. They're of an age where I shouldn't, and I don't want to be. Like, I want them to be able to say, hey, this isn't working for me. Until we get to that point, I will gladly keep my role as it is, no matter how much I don't want to do it.
I feel I am, but I wish I wasn't. Like, I wish I knew what she wanted, opposed to definitely parent. I would have been her voice regardless, like with school or whatever. But she has seizures, so she has to give blood. And I know she doesn't want to do it. And instead of just holding her down to get the blood, which we have to do, I wish I could have a conversation with her to say, well, we're doing this because of this. It's going to be unpleasant, but mommy will be right here. We're not having these conversations. So I feel like a villain here. If something's bothering her, she doesn't come and say something's bothering her or my mouth hurts or whatever. So I am her voice. I would rather she be her own voice.
I feel like being a voice of your child is something that you are required to do early on. But I feel in order to get the development of the child correct, you have to be less and less of a voice. You have to allow the child to have their own voice, because if you always speak for him, if you always do things for him, it creates dependence. And I feel that I need to scale back. I'm expecting to slowly that he would develop his own things and he's going to be his own person and speak for himself. And he does it quite effectively. He doesn't speak, but a lot of the body language and the minimal verbal that he has, it gives him enough. But I feel like as he grows older, it's going to be less and less enough. And he's going to have to find in him something to get him to the next level.
I mean, definitely for Charlie, my eldest, because he doesn't have a voice of his own. Like I was saying earlier, he can only communicate basic needs, like I want a cookie. So for everything else, he relies on me to be his voice and advocate for him and get him the services and whatever he needs in that moment. I'm his voice until if he ever finds a way to communicate beyond those basic needs.
Speaking autistic people may not necessarily agree that parents are defaulted to being their child's voice, however.
I feel like some people really can understand their children and be their child's voice, and some other ones really don't. I think in all cases, even for people who speak, I always felt for many years that my parents didn't understand me at all.
The facts are, if a child, especially child, not even adult yet, is nonverbal or non-speaking, and has to get their needs met, somebody has to voice for them. I mean, that's just a fact. You can't just let the child go to the doctor and just sit there and the child's hurting and you know something's wrong, but you just, I can't be their voice, so they'll just sit there in front of the doctor and the doctor can guess. Or you can say, he's been rubbing his arm and crying when he lifts his arm. Somebody has to voice it. So, a little bit, the parents or the person the closest to them does have to be their voice sometimes. I'm not against them saying that. I think sometimes it can be a little I'm my child's voice, like I'm everything. It can come across that way when you put memes up there like I am my child's voice. Well, you're not. You're their advocate, and you voice for them when needed. But they do have their own voice. They have their own likes and dislikes and things like that.
When asked if there was any point in life that he felt it was accurate to say that a parent or family member or maybe an autistic advocate was his voice, Ben had this to say.
No, but close with my mom and CRP, I don't think anyone ever could really be my voice.
I think Ben's answer here is very insightful because it shows us that no one can really truly be someone else's voice, but if someone were to come as close as possible to that, that would be his mom and his CRP, people who help him communicate. These are the people who are with him often, helping to support him, helping to make sure that he is able to communicate his needs, thoughts, wants, desires, etc., and support his autonomy. An additional part of this unnecessary divide of parents versus autistic advocates are those caught in between as autistic parents of non-speaking autistic children.
I thought about this question a lot. I feel like it's an autistic thing. We try not to fit into a particular mold. We're not trying to find a place. I feel like we kind of on our own a lot of times, and it's how we like it, because being in a particular place, being in a particular position is very stressful. It constrains you. It makes you kind of like, okay, I have to say it this way. I have to be this way, but this is my spot. This is how I respond to things. And this just goes against my nature. I don't really feel that I have to be in a particular place in the autistic community. I feel like it's just a lot of the autistics kind of have their own views and they express it. And some autistics agree, some disagree. It's a very diverse community, and there's no unified way that this is how autistic people say or do things or respond to things. A lot of us disagree with each other. And I feel like it's just because of our nature. It's just we're not built that way.
It's a balance. I think I speak about my experience as a parent more than my experience as an autistic adult, partly because I really don't fit in with the majority of autistic adults I've met on social media. I get a lot of criticism, negative feedback, to put it nicely, from autistic adults simply because I don't share their views. So I guess I relate more to parents than autistic adults. But I do want to speak about my experience as an autistic person. It's just that it doesn't seem to be welcome because it doesn't fit with the vocal minority.
Overall, through the thoughts and perspectives of those I've spoken to, there's a clear message that there is a divide, but it doesn't need to exist. Every person as part of the conversation is important. The people closest to autistic non-speakers are their greatest advocates, but no one can truly be someone else's voice. Autistic advocacy spaces should be elevating the perspectives and voices of non-speakers who have gained access to communication for better representation, reframing our conversations from some kind of battle or power struggle to one of collaboration and support of non-speakers should really be our goal.
I think for the most part, they are all amazing human beings, but they must acknowledge that they can never fully represent the autistic experience. Mainly non-autistics, but also autistics. Like, I could probably relate to a lot of your struggles, but could never fully speak for them. We are all unique. That's the last sentence. I think people need to listen more and ask questions. There are so many assumptions and such a narrow scope of representation. These assumptions and misrepresentations impact education and communication rights of so many.
If an advocate has connections with other organizations where they can say, like, hey, you know what? I noticed that this organization is not really providing the right money for the right causes. I'd be like, hey, based on my studies and my area of expertise, I think that autistic people need more this. Autistic people need more that. Kind of like a common ground for accommodations and support. Advice and pointing a person to the right direction, I think, is the best thing they can do. I feel like these advocates should be there to be a guide, offer solutions, and that's it. I feel like there's a lot of attacks. There's a lot of negative information and confusing information being shown on social media, and I don't feel like that's advocacy at all. I feel like that's just judgment, pretty much, and that doesn't do nothing to anyone. And nobody likes being judged, and nobody's perfect either.
There's professional advocates. There's autistic people who are advocates. There's parents, grandparents, brothers, sisters, for us all to come in because we all have a different perspective. You're looking at it from one perspective. I'm looking at it from another. A brother or sister might be looking at it from another. We need to come at it and look at it from the different perspectives because you see something one way and I see something a different way from our different perspectives. I think we all need to come together and understand that, yes, we see things differently, but we're all trying to do good. And sometimes we get it wrong. I mean, we're people, we make mistakes. Sometimes we get it wrong. And to be able to say, I understand that you're trying to help, but I don't feel like, and then X, Y, Z as to why you feel like that is the reason it's appropriate. And it's okay to disagree, too.
I just feel like everybody needs to give each other a break. Just like we're all humans. We're all trying to make it in one way or another. And it's not like them against them. It shouldn't be that way. Because everyone's just trying to do the best they can.
My thing is everybody's going to feel different. Just like autistics are different, every person is different. They're going to feel different about it. But as a parent, we're also going to feel different about it as a parent.
I feel like non-speaking autistics need to communicate for themselves. There are many different ways that the non-speaking autistics can communicate. You know, whether it's AAC, if that's the path they chose, whether it's limited verbal, whether it's body language, because parents and caregivers are not always 100% aware. I mean, the logical choice, obviously, the caregivers that need to communicate for the child, but I feel like it takes away from the nonverbal person. It puts them in the back and everybody's speaking for them, and I don't think it's right.
I think it's important for people to remember that if they know one autistic person, they know one autistic person. That's a quote from Dr. Stephen Shore that I really like. It shows that autistic people are individual and we all have different views, different needs.
If you are on the journey to communication or communicating already, then let the world hear what you think and have to say. They may not agree with every thought you have, but isn't that what having your own voice means?
I want to sincerely thank everyone who took the time to interview with me. Please check out the full interviews that will be released in the following weeks. Everyone had a lot of great things to share and interesting perspectives and takes, and I think it would do us well as a community to listen to everyone's different thoughts and ideas instead of just repeating back the ones that we typically hear or are in support of. On the screen, you should see the thumbnails and release dates for these full interviews. I have spread them out every other week just so that way I can bring you content that's not necessarily just from this particular conversation. So be sure to come back on those dates for those interviews, especially if you're interested in what a particular interviewee had to say. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and hit that like button and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Just a reminder, please be respectful of everyone in this video, all of the people who agreed to interview with me. They spent their time to talk with me, and I think that because of that, you should be respectful of them having shared their time and their energy and their thoughts. So it's okay to disagree with somebody, just please don't go attacking anyone, and please be respectful to each other in the comment section. If you're interested in more autism related content from me, you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I try to upload a new video every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you to everyone who supports me here on YouTube as YouTube channel members, through Ko-fi, and as patrons on Patreon. And a special thank you to my Spinny Stimmy tier patrons, Jack Varney and Philip Noah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!